It is still going to be a long slog. It's still going to go into 2024. But yeah, I think we're talking more about a gradual Ukrainian liberation of territory than the Russians being able to hold the lines.
Ukrainian generals claim they have breached Russia's first line of defence in the south. Since June, the territorial gains have been, as you well know, small. So, how much of a breakthrough is this? Scott Lucas is the Professor of American Studies and Specialist in US and British foreign policy. Scott, good morning.
Very good morning, Rosie.
If we can believe these claims, how significant is this in what has been a pretty painful and slower than anticipated counteroffensive?
Well, first of all, Rosie, we can believe this. It's not just Ukrainian generals and Ukrainian officials that are saying they've made significant advances in the Zaporizhzhia region in the south of the country. This is actually confirmed by satellite footage. It's confirmed by others on the ground, including Russian military observers who say yes, that their main defense line, the defense line to which they devoted about 60% of their effort for months, has been breached. The Ukrainians have advanced by around about 10 to 15 kilometers south of their starting point. Now, that might seem small in terms of mileage, but the fact is to get through these layers of minefields, to get through these layers of trenches and of wire, that's, in other words, I think the hardest part for the Ukrainian counteroffensive. They still face a second and a third line of defense in the south, but those will not be as built up as the first line. And we also have reports, again, including from military analysts, not just Ukrainian officials, and including from the Russian military observers, that they're having problems with their troop levels. One of their top commanders, in fact, the top commander in Zaporizhzhia, resigned, just quit 2 weeks ago, and complained to higher authorities that they weren't getting the resources they need to hold out against Ukraine.
I guess it might mean sort of an accelerating pace in the spring offensive.
Yeah, I mean, Rosie, I'm going to knock back a lot of the chatter that was out there in the Western media. This wasn't just Russian propaganda, but in the Western media, which is, this was a failing counteroffensive, which had begun in June, and of course now is about 3 months old. And that is, anyone who was expecting a quick counteroffensive similar to what Ukraine had done last autumn, when it very quickly regained the Northeast and started to advance on the Russian occupied areas in the east of, quite frankly, really wasn't paying that much attention. The Battle of the Bulge in World War II, after, or sorry, the Allied advance after World War II, in the Normandy landings of June 44, took a couple of months, including in battles like the Battle of the Bulge, before it began to break the German defense lines. So to expect the Ukrainians to advance within days, within weeks, well, it was a bit silly, to be honest with you. Now, that was compounded, I think, by some tactics that were not effective against the Russian defense lines. I think there was too much of charging armored vehicles uh, through the minefields. The
Mm.
Russians were able to hit them very quickly, to back that up with artillery strikes. But the Ukrainians learned from that. And the Ukrainians continue to get, and this is vital, the international assistance that is needed to sustain this counteroffensive.
Yeah.
Uh, it is still going to be a long slog. It's still going to go into 2024. But yeah, I think we're talking more about a gradual Ukrainian liberation of territory than the Russians being able to hold the lines.
Yeah, and a new man at the helm to oversee that. We've learned that Ukraine's defense minister has been dismissed. Zelensky said it was time for new approaches. What do you think he means?
Well, to put it in a nutshell, this is motivated primarily by domestic politics, and specifically the allegations of corruption against the defense minister, Alexei Reznikov. Reznikov had been defense minister since November 2021. That's about 3 months before the Russian invasion. I think he had been regarded quite highly, including by Western partners, in terms of what was happening with the military effort. But early this year, there was a major corruption scandal um, in Ukraine about the defense ministry overpaying um, for supplies of rations to troops, with allegations of bribery surrounding some of the senior officials. Reznikov barely survived that, but those allegations of corruption have recurred yet again, with yet more contracts and the allegation that 1 million troops were receiving, or sorry, that a million rations were inadequate and not fit for consumption by troops.
Mm.
And that was it. You know, for Reznikov to survive one corruption scandal early this year, okay, there's no way he was going to survive a second.
And two was too much. Scott, thank you so much for your analysis. Scott Lucas is a professor of American Studies, specialist in US and British foreign policy, and friend of this programme. Whenever there's a development, it is brilliant to have Scott's insight.